Welcome to Network Jersey's second interview with the fabulous Lee Durrell. So I'd just like to thank Lee for coming along tonight. Thank you all for braving a frosty February night and the threat of snow later. You can see the pictures running up here, and obviously they're interesting, and they may throw up some questions you might like to ask after the interview. So what we'll do, we'll rerun them after the interview's finished, and it might jog someone to think, oh, what's this? Give some information on that. All proceeds from tonight, over and above costs, will go to Durrell. So if there's any collection boxes out there, please give generously. It'd be nice. Thank you. We're at Network Jersey. We're getting organised. We've got a brand new website in build at the moment. It'll have up-to-date calendars. It'll have information on the events, and that'll be out in about a month. So at the moment, there's a live site, networkjersey.com, that you can click on and register, and you'll get the odd email saying what's going on. But we're proud to announce that Kevin King's kindly agreed to be our next interview on the 26th of March, which will again be in these premises, I think. We'll confirm that, and that will come out. So I'd like to hand over to Mandy Lefevre from Airtel Vodafone, just to have our proud sponsors.
Lovely. Thank you, Andy. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Network Jersey interview in support of Durrell, which Airtel Vodafone are very proud to be able to sponsor this event. It's a very exciting time for Airtel Vodafone. We were recently shown to have the highest customer satisfaction ratings in the Channel Islands. This was an independent survey carried out by the regulator on all mobile service providers. And also we're working very hard towards 4G and launching our network to give you better connection, up to 10 times faster, to connect to your friends, family, colleagues and clients. The Airtel Vodafone team will be here afterwards if you've got any questions, so please feel free to actually ask away after this interview. After the success of the first event, where one of Jersey's heavyweight business leaders, Martin Brailsford, went face to face with one of our Jersey's former heavyweight business journalists, our very own Harry Randall, I'm really looking forward to hearing from one of the world's most influential and celebrated conservationists, Lee Durrell, MBE. So I won't keep you any longer, but thank you very much for your attendance and support, and enjoy the evening.
Lee McGeorge Durrell, born in Memphis, Tennessee, in September. And as a child, she filled empty doll boxes with collections of animals. We'll go and examine that in a while. She met Gerald, founder of the Trust, during one of his lecture tours in America. Sorry, I'm having trouble reading this without my glasses on. And they married in 1979. They wrote books, they presented television shows, they went to Madagascar, they did everything that any normal couple would do. And of course this isn't a normal audience tonight, because I asked this lovely young lady earlier on, where are you from? Panama. What do you do? I'm an environmental lawyer. So I've never met anybody from Panama, and I've never met an environmental lawyer, so this really is quite an unusual audience for me. So we will get to the important person in the room, which was very much as Lee, and as I say, I didn't want to go through too much of it, but there is a whole biography where we are talking about qualifications running down the length of my arm, positions held, there's numerous and far too many to mention, career interests mainly to do with conservation, biodiversity, and aviation in the service of conservation as well. So we have a bit of flying involved too, and to say the least. So ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to give a very formal welcome to Lee Durrell. I'm going to start with a question I tend to ask all my interviewees, and poor old Martin got it as well, because it takes you back to the history of time. Where were you aged 10? Where were you? How many sisters and brothers do you have? And what was your pecking order in the family home?
Well, as you mentioned, I was born in Memphis, Tennessee, good old southern state. At age 10, I went to an all-girls school, very much like Jersey Girls College here, which I was governor of at one point, so it was a very familiar sort of thing, so I was there. I was am the eldest of 3 children, and I am told that I was the bossiest one. I can't imagine by anybody. But I have a little sister who's 6 years younger, so, rather bossable, if you know what I mean.
You get the opportunity to do so, yeah. And so what pets did you have when you were a young girl?
What pets did I have? I had all the usual stuff, dogs and cats and hamsters, but I adored guinea pigs, so I usually had loads of guinea pigs. Budgies, of course. As for exotic sort of pets, I had, you could buy caimans back in those days. Okay. Caimans are alligator-like things from South America. And I always had a caiman or two going.
Pretty normal then, yeah.
And a most wonderful creature that we called box turtle in America, but it's actually a tortoise. So it's a big high-dome tortoise that are found in the eastern and southeastern part of the United States. And I'd always have 1 or 2 of those around. And I had ducks and geese and white rats and just things that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, what do you enjoy doing when you're young? What would you like to have done if you not followed the career path you took?
What I was sort of known for, I guess I could say, is that I loved to do, when I was very young, I loved to do nature collections. Go out into the woods or the field or something and collect leaves and little things and objects and really natural history stuff, which kind of belied, the fact later on Jerry and I did a lot of that ourselves.
So the passion was in you. It was
there, and I sort of got my teachers got back, or I got back my teachers, I should say, I think I was age 10, as a matter of fact, American 5th grade they call it, and we were supposed to do a nature collection for a class, and I went out and brought back all these little objets and things, and one looked kind of like it was on a stick, and it was all a kind of a webby kind of cocoon-like thing. I thought it was a cocoon, and I put it in my desk. Remember those days you had those flip-top desks? I put it in my desk and sat there, and a little while later, the same afternoon, all these little spiderlings started creeping out, pouring out of my desk. All the other girls in the class, they were just, screaming, and the teacher was absolutely furious. What have you brought in? So I kind of was known for that.
Particularly poisonous spiders? Or
No, I don't know. Little tiny spiderlings, there's thousands of them come out.
Lovely. And so, what would you like to have done? Was there anything else you were doing? You were thinking, I'd like to do this.
I remember really well. There was one of those aptitude questionnaires that they give out in school, and I answered mine, and it turned out that I was best suited to become a forest ranger. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But if in real retrospect, I think what I'd love to have done was to have become a pilot, because I came to aviation very late in life, and couldn't really make a career out of it. And but I think that would have been something really that I've enjoyed.
But the world would have missed you otherwise if you found piloting earlier. So the passion for your animals began very early, and so was it always your intention then, otherwise, to become involved with them and be called with
I mean, it was really. I can't ever think of a time when I, didn't do something with animals. And can I tell my earliest story? Because you mentioned it. It was sort of intriguing, I hope. It was when I was 3 years old, and I had got, I think it was for Christmas, a beautiful bride doll. And she came in, do you remember our old steamer trunks? So there's a little miniature steamer trunk about like this, and you'd open it up, and the doll lived in it, and all her little clothes. And I discarded the doll and discarded the clothes and found a dead squirrel and kept it in that trunk. and dragged it around with me. And my mother she just really didn't quite know what to do. So eventually she really had to take it away.
Oh, lovely.
So there was that. And I had my grandfather, who was actually pictured there, he was an amateur carpenter. And he and I would cook up all of these designs for my animal cages. And I had the first one I remember again, I was about 4 or 5, I think, and had what we called a frog. It was actually it was an American toad, but because we made the frog box. So he was always talking about the frog box. And it was just remember we painted it red. It was probably a terrible thing to do. But so that was and he built all my cages, my guinea pigs and my caimans and things
fantastic.
like that. Yeah.
No, I didn't know that. That's really fun. So you're definitely very close to him, were you?
My grandfather.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Jerry and I dedicated the book that we wrote called The Amateur Naturalist. He dedicated his part of it to Theodore Stephanides, who was his mentor, whom you'll remember having read about in My Family and Other Animals. And I dedicated it to Pa, who was my grandfather.
Oh,
so,
lovely.
yeah.
So you mentioned Jerry, we're all naturally enough aware of some of the history and whatnot, but when did you actually become first aware of Gerald Durrell and his work, and and why was it fascinating to you?
Right. Well, I was actually, relatively late in life. I was already in graduate school studying zoology, and I knew Lawrence Durrell first. I was reading, as one did when you were 20 and you were reading Lawrence Durrell. I'm sure most of you did that. But we would used to type out quotes from Lawrence Durrell and stick them up on the door to the office. And so that was Lawrence Durrell. I didn't know he had a brother. And I did my graduate research in Madagascar. And well, for one reason or another, I was living with some missionaries. And
it's not the sort of ordinary thing people say. I did my graduate research in Madagascar, and I was living with some missionaries. So can we rewind just a little bit?
Yes,
How do we get to Madagascar?
How do we get to Madagascar?
Yeah. Well, let's do that.
Oh, all right. Because that does sort of lead into why I met Jerry and the whole story, really.
Yeah.
So I did my zoology degree at Duke University. This was a postgraduate degree. And worked there at what's called the Duke Lemur Center now. Great, very fine breeding colony, these lemurs, these very rare species from Madagascar. And I was working there and fell in love with lemurs and the whole idea of Madagascar and decided to do my field work in Madagascar. So went there in 1973, did my work, but right at the moment I was supposed to go back and write up and all that, there was first of all there was a hurricane, and that destroyed the little sort of hut that I was living in.
Wow, that must have been scary.
It really was scary. There was a corrugated iron roof, and the winds just peeled back the roof like a sardine tin. I do remember. And so that's why I was living with missionaries after that, because I'd moved with my friends, the missionaries. And then there was very short, a week later of the hurricane, there was a military coup, and the whole island was locked down. Nobody could move anywhere. I was way down south, and there was no, all the real troubles were in the capital city and further up north, and so, it really didn't affect me other than that I couldn't move. So all my plans to go back to America, all flights cancelled, and I was there for another 6 months.
Oh, wow.
So I needed something to read, didn't I? So I went to the mission library and just had a look around, and the name Durrell came up, and it was Gerald Durrell.
But you were been aware of Lawrence before you got out
yes,
there.
so I'd known Lawrence very, and I thought, well, who is this? And so I started reading. There were several different things. I think it was Menagerie Manor was the first one I read, not My Family and Other Animals. So I knew all about his, place in Jersey early on, and it was just delightful. And I was in Madagascar. I had a pet fruit bat called Dorian, and Dorian's pictured. And he was a baby. I rescued him. He'd fallen off his mother in the roost, and I'd rescued him, was rearing him, and he was just one of the best animals I've ever had. You all have seen the fruit bats at Durrell, and how they hang upside down. He would hang from my wrist like this, and then he'd wrap his little hand, his little wings around my hand like that. So I would be lying on my pallet on the floor in the missionary's house, reading Gerald Durrell with my little fruit bat. It was wonderful. So that's how I was introduced to Jerry, but really became a hero. I think there were a couple of books in the mission library. But then I went back to America finally, and started writing out my dissertation research. And lo and behold, my professor said, Lee, would you like to come to a very special dinner party with a man called Gerald Durrell? And
Wow.
I thought, that's my hero. So here was I, completely starstruck. And he then said, I made a direct beeline for that girl on the poof.
So he came straight over to you.
He did, and he didn't talk to anybody else. It was really getting embarrassing. But then we were to go to dinner that night in a little restaurant sort of out in the country, and I was the only one who knew the way to it. And so I was to lead a convoy of all these people. And Jerry said, "Oh, I'll come with you, Lee." Oh, okay. And I was driving a little yellow Carmen Gear at the time. Wow. It was the coolest car. But it was full of, dead leaves and dog hairs and all that. So that was So anyway, so we drove and we were talking about animals in Madagascar and everything. And I lost the way. It took an hour to get to this restaurant. Everybody was absolutely... I was not flavour of them.
What a great story, though. I mean, what a fantastic story. Because you haven't had Jerry been to Madagascar?
No. That's another interesting thing. So, do you want me to sort of fast forward a little?
Yeah, fast forward a bit. Yeah,
then you can pull me back.
We can rewind you back a bit. Yeah.
So what happened was we got along well. He telephoned me. I came and visited him in France a few months later. Came to Jersey for the first time in January '78. Does anybody remember that? It was the coldest and snowiest place. But in America, I was stuck in JFK Airport for 3 days trying to get over here. And ended up here, and that's kind of when it all happened. It became clear that that's what he had invited me over for. I thought it was to do some more scientific research, which is what he told me.
Well, it was, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Very in-depth study, wasn't it? So anyway, one thing led to another. We got married. Got married in Memphis, in my parents' back garden. It was a lovely wedding. But fast forwarding a bit, Jerry had never been to Madagascar, but because I had just done my field work and dissertation and that, I wanted to go to a conference there, and this was probably in '79 or something, 78. And so I took Jerry to Madagascar.
Wow.
And that was, he was it was so odd that he'd not been to that country before, because it's such an amazing place with, all the animals and the plants found only there, nowhere else in the world. It's just a zoologist's paradise, really. So I took Jerry to Madagascar the first time. We went a couple of times, then we made a television series there in the early 80s.
But so just rewinding a bit then, the early relationship with Jerry, I mean, you just said that you came over here, you saw him in France, etc. So, I mean, that must have been a whirlwind for you, from a girl from America to...
It was pretty interesting.
And what was he like? We know evidently a very flamboyant character.
Yeah, he was flamboyant, charismatic, a lot of fun. He always wanted to do interesting things, and he delighted in showing me these sorts of things. He was just as funny as he was in his books, and he did have a side that he could get very angry at things. It was always over, sort of things about conservation and animals and what human beings were doing to the planet, and he would just get furious. He was like an Old Testament prophet, this flowing hair and this sort of anger. But other than that, it was great.
So who was just examine that a little bit? Who was that sort of directed at? Was that frustration at authorities, or at things that weren't happening quickly enough?
Things that he could see the way the world was going, and he knew what could be done to fix it. But of course, that's not the way of the world, is it? And so I guess it was frustration, And it was, how could our race be so stupid as to treat the planet this way and all of the animals. And he was like that from, age whatever, when he was a teenager. He worked at Whipsnade Zoo, and I think just after the war. And then he became an animal collector for zoos, and did that for a while. But the zoos would say, oh, well, it doesn't matter if these animals die when we get them in our care, because there are plenty more where they came from. And Jerry was in the position to see that they're not. And that is when he started saying, I am going to start my own zoo and devote it to animal conservation, saving endangered species.
And Jersey was chosen as the...
Well, therein lies another tale. He tried to get started in the UK. He had an animal affection at his sister's house in Bournemouth, which she was not terribly appreciative of. She didn't mind too much, but it was the neighbours who didn't mind. And he asked the Bournemouth Council and the Poole Council to if he could start a zoo somewhere. Absolutely none of it. Nobody would have it. And a few false starts. Anyway, his publisher, he was well published by this time, said, why don't you go try the Channel Islands? There's a good climate, there's a benign bureaucracy.
When was that?
This was in 1958. So he came down here, and it was Jersey, and within 24 hours, he found a place up at Blazo Grove Trinity.
Wow.
The
24 hours?
Yes,
really?
24 hours, I kid you not.
Wow.
They rang up the bailiff, I can't remember whoever it was at the time, do you think we could do this? Great idea. Come on, bring a zoo to Jersey.
God, how times have changed.
You see, that was about the time, tourism was starting to get going, and it was a good attraction, a visitor attraction.
Well, the next time I go to Bournemouth and Poole, I will go and find somebody to say thank you for.
Anyway, how did we get onto that?
Well, we're going to go wherever we're going to go. So it was interesting to find out, because at the end of the day, 40 years of doing what you've been doing is absolutely incredible. And but just going to that now, evidently there was a lot of media work, writing, studies you were doing with Jerry. Can you outline some of the projects that you felt particularly proud of? Maybe one or two funny things. In media, the 80s really were pretty much devoted to doing television series and doing books about the series, or writing a book and doing a series about the book, and sort of one thing led to another. And one of the most fun things we did, it was based on the book we've done called The Amateur Naturalist, and we shot that over about 2 years, and that took us to about 20 different countries, I think, and I totted it up 3 times around the world and traveling, and we went from places like the glaciers in Canada down to reserves in South Africa, and we did a lot of filming in Europe, and we went to... And how many times did you bump into Alan Wicker?
Jerry always bumped into him in the fish market for some reason. No. Anyway, that was a great series called The Amateur Naturalist, and it was very popular as well, and people still stop and talk to me about it.
And so was the writing sort of very intense, and when would the two of you sit down together and work on stuff, or
what we would do, I would sort of do the research, and Jerry would turn it into the purple prose.
Okay.
That's how we worked.
That was so you did the hard slog.
Well, we both kept, and this is a good question though, Harry, we both kept journals during our travels, and mine would be very sort of scientific and this, that, and the other, and Jerry's just describing things and funny stories and stuff. The other one that I'm really proud of for a different reason is the TV series we did in the Soviet Union. We shot in 84, 85. This was long before Gorbachev. I think Andropov was the guy there. And it was very much of the Soviet Union. We had a KGB minder with us the whole time. but they allowed us to go to different parts of the country, the different republics, to film in the nature reserves and talk to the people who were doing all of their conservation work. And they were just a fantastic bunch of people throughout, you know, from the sort of the far east in Lake Baikal up to the northern tundra parts and down in the desert regions, and it was just an extraordinary experience.
I mean, it's extraordinary enough to see it at any point, but to see it when the borders were closed effectively, it must have been completely incredible.
It was really interesting.
But did you find that generally? I mean, evidently, this is a language that transcends borders. Conservation.
It's a good way to put it. Conservation, the love of animals, the love of nature. There is something unifying about that just brings people together.
So when you were going to ask for permission from governments and whatnot, I mean, I still can't get over the bailiff. It evidently is, you were getting yes as the answer rather than
Generally
no.
speaking, we get on very well with governments around the world because I think they appreciate what we do. But you did mention the word funny story. I did think of one. This is on the Russian shoot, or the Soviet shoot. We were, of course, easily allowed down into the Ukraine. There's a big place there called Askanyanova, which is a zoo and a reserve and the great steppe lands of Russia, which are called prairies in America, there were very few left at that time in the 80s. I think there are probably none now, being in the Ukraine. We went down to film at this place called Askanyanova, where they were trying to do breeding experiments on wild animals. I mean, I remember going and milking a herd of eland, for example, in this area. And so we were driving around with the crew and jeeps and things and looking on these beautiful steppe lands. They had a herd of Mongolian wild horses, the Zvolsky's horses. Do you all remember when we had Zvolsky's horse here a few years ago? And really naturalistic herds of them. There'd be a stallion with his mares and then another group over here, and we're trying to get interesting behavior. And in the distance, we saw a horse, and it was on its back, and its legs were stuck up in the air stiff. It was clearly a dead horse. And we said, wow, look, there's a dead horse. We need to go and film it and see what's going on. And the KGB guy said, no, it's not dead, it's just asleep. No, we don't want to film that. It's just a sleeping horse. Let's go off and do something.
Brilliant.
Is that where John Cleese got the idea?
Can you speak sort of generally about Madagascar, the ecosystem, and your passion for it? Why? I mean, evidently it's unique. So if you can sort of, because I don't really know very much about the country apart from the fact that it is unique. So why did it grab your attention so much?
It's the fourth largest island in the world. It's got a very varied topography. It goes north-south, so different.
I'm learning things here.
And it started breaking off from mainland Africa and India. Do you remember Gondwana land, when all the southern continents were together? About 160 million years ago is when the whole thing started to break apart. And Madagascar was last connected to Africa probably 40, 50, 60 million years ago. And so since that time, it's been completely isolated. And so all the animals and plants ancestors that were on the island at the time began to evolve in their own ways. And the lemurs, though, were not there at that point. They rafted over from Africa, like little bush baby type things.
Wow. Very
primitive. So they rafted over and then became the lemurs. But they never evolved into monkeys and apes. They just kind of stayed lemurs. So, and the same thing happened in many other plant and animal groups. So, as I said, it was a naturalist paradise. And so that was that long ago. Human beings didn't arrive in Madagascar till 2,000 years ago. Not very long.
Okay.
And they did what humans do everywhere in the world.
Destroy it.
Yeah, destroy it. And so over those 2,000 years, the major forests of Madagascar have gone. There are only forests now around the outer ring of the island, and very fragmented. And these fantastic animals and plants started dying out. I mean, there was a lemur as big as a calf
Wow.
There was the heaviest bird in the world, sometimes called the elephant bird. It was the Sinbad's rock, you know, Sinbad the sailor, the legend of Sinbad. And you could still find eggs of that bird in sort of dried riverbeds.
Oh, okay.
And Jerry and I were filmed with one when we were filming there once. And that egg is, I kid you not, that big.
Wow.
Okay, that's about, whereas an ostrich egg is what, about like that.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's gone. That's extinct.
And when does that become extinct?
Probably it was written about actually by a French naturalist about in 16 something, as still alive. So that's not long ago that it became extinct. So Madagascar is so interesting, you know, biologically, but also very challenging in conservation terms, and that's why I think we're so interested in it.
No,
The
it
people
makes
are
perfect
fantastic.
sense.
People are lovely people, and you know, people have got to eat. They're poor. It's one of the poorest countries in the world, and
And how many times have you been there then?
Over the years, I've been there for I don't know, 20 times, something like that. What happened was, because I knew Madagascar so well, Jerry asked me if I would like to respond to a request we had to try to save the rarest tortoise in the world. This was back in '83 we started, and I said, yes, thanks, I'd love to do that, thank you. So I'll do it.
Yeah.
And that started really the Trust Madagascar program, which has become our biggest program. Our budget for it's over £1 million a year. We have 30 people working for us in Madagascar. I mean, really, it's quite something. It's really very special. I do not manage it now at all, but other very capable people do.
But I'm sure if there was a problem, you could probably pick up the phone to somebody
Well,
there, couldn't you?
maybe.
Yeah. Okay, and apart from Durrell itself, what other projects are you working on, or have you worked on that you're particularly sort of proud of?
They all somehow seem to be related to Durrell conservation. But one thing I've just recently done, and it's ongoing, I'm proud of it, is to start a new non-profit, as they call it in America, called American Friends of Durrell, and it's a Durrell support group. But it allows the Americans to give gifts or donate money tax exempt.
Oh,
And you all know the Americans love their tax exemption. And it took about 2 years working with lawyers, working with the Internal Revenue Service, but we
Sounds
finally
riveting.
to get our tax exempt status, and that came to us last August. It was. And I'm the president of it.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
and how's it going? I mean, if you got last August, have you seen donations?
We had our launch in December. Its office is in Memphis, my hometown.
Surprise, surprise. Yeah.
My sister is on the board.
Surprise, surprise.
This is all cleared with the IRS, believe me. And we had a big party, and we raised $60,000.
Wow.
Which was really, it was a good start. And what I'm going to do next, the sort of model is I'd go and give lectures, and then we'll have dinner parties with sort of exclusive dinner parties. And I'm going to hit New York next.
Oh, cool.
I'm going to go speak at the Explorers Club. I don't know if any of you ever heard of the crusty old Explorers Club. Jerry spoke there 45 years ago. So I'm going to go do that. And then
fantastic. Well, good luck with it. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I mean, it's been a good start.
Yeah.
Good start. We'll see how it goes.
You have to find out if Obama's read any of Jerry's books. That would be
an
obvious.
idea.
Yeah, well worth asking. See if he's done so. Going to Durrell, can you give me a general outline of the current challenges facing the trust, and both from a conservation perspective and from the financial one that you've raised?
Conservation-wise, we sort of one of the biggest global issues, but particularly for us and the way we do our conservation, is this whole question of invasive species. You know, these are the animals or plants that somehow or another get into an ecosystem that's foreign to them. Sometimes they just disappear because they can't make it, but other times they become invasive and they either kill or outcompete the natives there. This is particularly prevalent on islands where we work, and so, in fact, most of our species, that's the biggest threat to them. It's by invasives, I mean, rats, mice, cats. There's something called a red-backed spider that's attacking one of the lizards that we're working with.
Oh, right.
There's all sorts of things, down to disease, spread of disease. This horrible thing that's attacking the frogs of the world called the chytrid fungus. Well, chytrid fungus is something that has been spread by globalization. This is how these various species get to places. It's through trade, through human people coming in and such. And so for us, that is a big conservation challenge. And exactly how there are many methods that we've been using to try to get rid of these or control these things. But
And is there any particular species that are really close to the edge that you're concentrating on at the moment?
Well, quite a few. That's what we do.
No, I appreciate that, but I was just trying to say if there was anything in particular that you're working to.
Well, this one from Madagascar that we've worked on for so long and thought we'd turned the corner on, and it has suddenly become the target of the illegal wildlife trade. And people are, we bred the thing, we set up a national park, we released it, everything was going tickety-boo.
And which is it, sorry?
This is the ploughshare tortoise.
Ploughshare
tortoise, yeah, a wonderful breed. And anyway, suddenly there's a big Chinese market for it, not for eating it, but as a pet. And people just, people as they get richer, more prosperous, they want something that nobody else has.
It's a status symbol.
It's a status symbol.
Horrible.
Absolutely horrible. So we're down to maybe 200-300 left.
Definitely not right.
So that's something we're working hard on.
And I'll quickly go back to you saying you wanted your flying career.
Oh yes.
Because please tell us how did it start? What are you doing? You're still up there now? And
I have to be honest. I haven't flown in quite a while now because I've been kind of busy doing setting up this thing in America, and just it's just busy up there. But for a few years it was wonderful. It was because Jerry never would let me fly. I always wanted to learn to fly, and he never, he didn't like it himself, so he didn't want me to do it. So anyway, after he passed away, I decided to just take some lessons up at the Aero Club, and it was just fantastic. I loved it.
And where have you flown to?
Oh gosh, then what happened was I got my license. And then I went flying in Florida because that's where good weather and all that.
Yeah.
I met my friend Colin over there. He's he was my flying instructor.
Come fly me, yeah.
Come fly me. So made him move to Jersey, and so we got a little twin-engine airplane and started flying animals around for the trust to go to and from their breeding programs, and we have flown to Berlin and Prague and Mallorca and Amsterdam and just all over the place, taking animals from Jersey to other zoos and doing exchanges and coming back. Did a run to Zurich one time for fruit bats, and that was.
If you could have 3 wishes come true, what would they be?
I guess sort of on a global thing, I would.
On anything you like.
On anything. On a global scale, I would wish. These can be impossible wishes.
It can be whatever you want.
Wish that that politicians everywhere in the world would just wake up to the fact that the environmental issues are exceedingly, if not just important, they are absolutely the vital issues facing us all today. Aside from politics and wars and this, that, and the other, what we're doing to the planet is not going to go away. It's not going to get better until people have the will, there's the political will, to address these issues. One of which, of course, is human population growth. And believe me, that is the elephant in the room, even among conservationists. Nobody knows how to tackle it. Nobody wants to. you know, our species is so geared to short-term thinking, and that's the problem. Nobody will think beyond. That's what I wish. If people would just, the politicians and the governments would just open their eyes and
I won't go too far with it. What would you see as a long-term? So how do they do that? I mean, it's all right to say I'm opening my eyes, I'm taking a long-term solution, but I've got a population here. I have to feed. I have to put a roof over. We need space.
I think that both can be done. I think there is enough wealth in the world and enough resources that you know you can deal with poverty, and because you can bring people out of poverty once you do that, and there's education.
But doesn't that then create more need for resources and demand and all the rest of it?
Well, part of the education is to have fewer children, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Okay, that's number one. You've still got two to go.
I've still got two to go. The other one would be that Durrell would have no more financial worries, you know, that we could have an endowment.
Okay.
Universities are endowed. Why wouldn't somebody? And so that we could be free to not only continue the conservation work that we do so well, but expand it. I mean, as of the situation, the financial situation now, Harry, is that we cannot expand any of our work. We just haven't the resources to do it.
That's so
and
sad.
It is so sad, and it's so needed, and we know we can do it. You know, we've got the best staff in the world, and we know how to attract staff, but we cannot move now because of this financial situation.
And is that you being a victim of your own success there, or is it a case of there's so much other competition for donations and charities around, or are you suffering from that sort of thing?
No, I think we're suffering from the collapse of tourism in this island.
Okay.
I'm sorry to say it, but
No.
that's exactly what's happening, or what happened.
Yeah.
I think we have been pretty smart, maybe a little bit late, but smart at trying to develop the commercial side of what we do. We've got our campsite, which everybody loves, fantastic. We've got 2 restaurants, getting a cafe there. We're going to open a nursery, which is really...
I didn't know that.
Didn't know that. That's
that'd
really
be fun.
exciting, and that's going to be, you know, it's in keeping with our sort of lifelong learning and the culture of Durrell. That's going to, but that's just not enough yet. We just don't have enough people. In 1989, there were 380,000 visitors to Durrell, and now there are 180,000.
And the mix of that 180,000, is the number of locals growing all the time?
The number of locals is growing, and the number of visitors
is actually
But I
going
mean,
down.
we love locals coming because usually they're members.
Mhm.
They've paid a membership, and they're going to, you know, buy their coffees. They're going to bring their children. They're going to bring their guests. So that's absolutely fine. But because of that loss of numbers coming to us,
You can't make up the
we
shortfalls.
cannot make up the shortfall. You know, the same is true of visitor attractions. All visitor attractions in Jersey. At least we're open. As you know, some of them have had to close.
No, absolutely. Well, I hope a few people in this room might be able to help a bit more, and
Right.
one or two trusts and funds and things like that might be kicking around. No pressure, guys. And the third one, final wish. What
And
would
the
you
third
like?
one, so I've been through the 50th anniversary of the trust. I'd love to see the 100th anniversary. Let's see what's happening in the world and here at Durrell and in Jersey. But then I would be 110 years old. Oh, I gave it away. do your maths.
I hope you are around to see the 100th.
Thank you.
I'm sure plenty of people would do. So that will conclude the sort of formal bit. And a round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen.